Hello everyone and welcome to my presentation on Germany, Austria, Hungary, and their former empires. My name is William Cooper and I'm the proud grandson of Frida Cooper, who's an Amica resident of Austrian descent that passed away on July 7th of last year. I miss her, but I'm making my monthly presentations in her honor. We're continuing our travels to Afro-Eurasia. It covers 57% of the world's land area, but has 86% of its population. We began in the Middle East, then we went to Southern Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, East Asia, North Asia and Eastern Europe, and last month we began our travels to Western Europe, and today we continue our travels to Western Europe with Germany, Austria, and Hungary. Bon voyage. And next month, I hope to see you on the 26th of October as we visit Netherlands and Belgium. Before we start, the world has 200 countries, 700 languages, and over 4,000 recognized faiths. On the other hand, many countries share a history of colonization, conflicts, and treaties designed to resolve their issues that often created new ones. We learned in our previous presentations that World War I involved the Austro-Hungarian, German, and Ottoman empires, and that each were dissolved and broken up through treaties, resulting in the creation of several new countries. The beginning of Germany, Austria, and Hungary was with the Roman Empire that eventually split into the Eastern and Western Roman empires. Therefore, as they say, all roads lead to Rome. Let's begin. Today's presentation has 10 sections. The first couple relate to the Roman Empire, and then we move on to the Holy Roman Empire, the World Wars, and today. Section 1, Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire was created in 27 BC. So here we have a map of it in 117 AD at its greatest extent. And we see that it covered parts of 3 different continents: Europe, Africa, and Asia. In 395, it was divided into 2, the Eastern and Western Roman empires, because they decided that it was just too big. So here we have a little flow chart of what happened afterwards. So when we look at the Eastern Roman Empire, it fell in 1453, as it was conquered by the Ottomans. Then the Ottomans fell in 1922. The Western Roman Empire was then conquered by different Germanic groups and eventually became the Holy Roman Empire, which then became the Austrian Empire, which afterwards developed into the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So let's begin with learning about the Eastern Roman Empire. So in 330, its name was changed from Byzantium to Constantinople. So the capital was now named Constantinople, after their first leader's favorite person, himself. So it became Constantinople. However, it was renamed Istanbul in 1923. In 1229, the Ottoman Empire was created by Osman I, and it was established after the decline of the Seljuk Turks in Anatolia. But it expanded significantly in the 15th century. It fell in 1923 after post-World War I treaties. In 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottomans, marking the end of an era and heavily shifting the balance of power in Europe. Section 3, Western Roman Empire. So as we've covered in our presentation in Italy, after the split, eventually the Western Roman Empire began to fall. The first key event was the Visigoth sacking of Western Rome in 410, which was a major shock throughout the Eastern and the Western Roman empires, because it was the first time that Rome had fell to a foreign enemy in over 800 years. Just afterwards, in 476, once Rome was again still weak, a Germanic group led by Odoacer invaded, and they took over. In 488, the Ostrogoths then took it over, and they held it for several centuries. Now let's watch this video about the creation of the Holy Roman Empire. When you hear this word, Holy Roman Empire, you'd expect it to be divine, be of Roman origin, and be an empire. However, instead, it had little relation to being holy, and it was created by Germanic groups, and in a lot of situations, it was not even an empire, just a collection of hundreds of small states.
Emerging medieval period. Charlemagne went on to Surely you've heard of the Third Reich, which is how Nazi Germany proclaimed itself. They promised fanatical people the rise of an empire that would last 1,000 years. But the idea of a 1,000-year Reich was not unheard of in the history of the Germanic peoples. Today you will learn about the history of the Holy Roman Empire, also known as the First Reich, an empire that ruled Central Europe for almost a millennium. The Roman Empire was the largest European power in classical antiquity, as its territory covered about 46 current countries, stretching across the European, African, and Asian continents. But everything comes to an end. Kings die, alliances are broken, and even the most powerful empires can crumble, producing a dangerous power vacuum and opening the way for the emergence of new powers. With the decline of Roman power in Gaul during the 5th century, local Germanic tribes seized control of several territories. The Merovingian tribe, led by Clovis I, consolidated its power and dominion over other smaller tribes. Clovis I unified the Frankish tribes and became the first king of the Franks. In the mid-8th century, however, the Merovingians were whittled down to a small portion of nobles, who ruled their territories in a relaxing manner. The Carolingian dynasty, born out of an ancient Germanic lineage, took the lead in governmental affairs. In 751, Pepin III, son of Martel, became king of the Franks, with the support of Pope Zacharias. From this occurrence, the Carolingians maintained a close alliance with the papacy and the Catholic Church. Although there were plenty of well-organized kingdoms, Europe at that point in history was divided and unstable. Wars between kingdoms could break out at any time, and only the intervention of the Catholic Church could often prevent armed conflict. Everything was set to change in 768, when the son of Pepin III, Charlemagne, became king of the Franks, and embarked on a major expansion of his kingdom. He ultimately incorporated the territories of present-day France, Germany, northern Italy, and the Low Countries, binding the borders of the Frankish kingdom with the papal lands owned by the Catholic Church. Charlemagne established himself as a fierce defender of the interests of the Church and Christianity. His actions in the fight against some pagan tribes, namely the Lombards, made him a symbol of leadership and a strong candidate for the Emperor of the West, a role that had not been held for more than 3 centuries. On 25 December 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne as the first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire of Germany. The Carolingian dynasty became the cornerstone of the emerging medieval period. Charlemagne went on to defend his empire and expand it, following the ideal of renewing the Roman Empire, until he died in 814. Charlemagne's descendants failed to effectively rule the empire, which eventually split into 2 parts, West France and East France. After the death of Charlemagne's great-grandson, King Charles III, in 888, the Carolingian Empire broke up and was never restored. By the mid-10th century, another Germanic people, the Saxons, ruled the former empire's territories. The Saxon Emperor Otto III, who reigned from 983 to 1002, established the empire's capital in Rome. After that, popes and emperors quarreled for a long time over the right to elect religious leaders. Otto III died young during 1002, succeeded by his cousin Henry II, who eventually passed away in 1024 and was replaced by Conrad II, the first of the Salian dynasty. However, Conrad was elected king only after much debate between dukes and nobles. This group eventually became the College of Prince-Electors, who from the 13th century were privileged to elect the monarch who would be crowned by the Pope. The Holy Roman Empire was made up of 4 kingdoms: the Kingdom of Germany, the Kingdom of Italy, the Kingdom of Bohemia, and the Kingdom of Burgundy. During the High Middle Ages, kings often hired bishops in administrative matters, and frequently determined who would be appointed to ecclesiastical offices. This interference was increasingly seen as ill-suited to the papacy. The emperors of the Hohenstaufen family rose to power in 1138. Frederick I, also known as Frederick Barbarossa, was part of the Hohenstaufen family. He was the one who added the word holy to the empire's name. He wanted to be respected as much as the Pope. Frederick died in 1190, and not too long afterwards, the empire lost some of its significance. During the so-called Late Middle Ages, the ongoing difficulties in electing the emperor eventually led to the emergence of a permanent college of prince-electors, whose membership and procedures were set out in a decree called the Golden Bull of 1356, which lasted until 1806. The emperor would henceforth be elected by a majority of the nobility, rather than by the assent of all 7 electors. For those elected, the title became hereditary, and they had the right to mint coins and exercise jurisdiction. During the 13th century, a dramatic structural change in the way land was managed led to a shift in political power, from aristocratic feudalism to the ascendant bourgeois. The far-reaching development of cities and the emergence of the new bourgeois class altered the social, legal, and economic order of feudalism. For many generations now, the Holy Roman Empire had lacked a strong emperor to rule, but the empire continued to flourish nonetheless. Although imperial authority waned during the late Middle Ages, cities, guilds, and burghers cooperated to improve their position. Meanwhile, the imperial title passed through the Luxembourgish, Bavarian, and Bohemian dynasties to finally fall into the hands of the Austrian Habsburgs in the 15th century. Under Habsburg's rule, the Holy Roman Empire went through an age of great religious conflict. While the imperial family was firmly Catholic, the Protestant Reformation was increasingly gaining momentum in the north of the empire during 1517, when Martin Luther officially broke with the Pope and fragmented Western Christianity. After the Treaty of Westphalia, the Habsburgs stood as Holy Roman Emperors, but their power was increasingly confined to their own Austrian, Bohemian, and Hungarian territories. During the Battle of Vienna that took place in 1683, the army of the Holy Roman Empire, led by Polish King John III, decisively overpowered a large Turkish force, stopping the Ottoman advance in the west and prompting the eventual breakup of the Ottoman Empire in Europe. Throughout the 18th century, the Habsburgs were involved in several European conflicts, such as the War of the Spanish Succession, the War of the Polish Succession, and the War of the Austrian Succession. German dualism between Austria and Prussia dominated the history of the Holy Roman Empire after the year 1740. Around the year 1800, France, which had always been perceived as a major threat to the empire, initiated a new wave of hostilities waged by revolutionary armies. With Napoleon Bonaparte's rise, France marched eastward with unprecedented success. In 1805, Napoleon inflicted such a crushing defeat on the Holy Roman Emperor that his authority outside the Habsburg lands ceased to exist. The following year, the Holy Roman Empire was officially dissolved, while the French rearranged most of the German states into their so-called Confederation of the Rhine. After Napoleon's defeat, the Confederation concept remained in force. All German states, including Prussia and Austria, joined the new German Confederation. From this new coalition of states, the borders of modern Germany came into being, although Austria and the Habsburgs were excluded from this project by Prussia's ongoing expansion. In Vienna, the Habsburg family clung to power as emperors of Austria-Hungary, and ruled until the unfolding events of the First World War rendered the imperial title obsolete. The millennial history of the Holy Roman Empire is filled with grandiose achievements and tumultuous periods. Its existence was of major importance to European history, helping to shape the ties between many countries and laying down political standards that persist to this day.
Now, the video talks about the significance of the Habsburgs. Let's just learn a little bit more about them. So the name Habsburg comes from Habsburg Castle in Switzerland. However, in 1278, power moved to Vienna. And the Habsburgs are known for having the most powerful chins in the world, with historians saying that some of them could hit a home run because of their inbreeding. Now, from 1438 to 1806, with the exception of a short 3-year period, the Holy Roman Emperor was also a Habsburg. Post-Holy Roman Empire. So we also heard about Napoleon's 7 coalition wars, with all of them including Austria and some of them including Prussia and several German states. Napoleon won the first 5, but lost the 6th, was exiled, came back to lose the 7th, was exiled, and then he died. So in 1804, the Austrian Empire was created, although it was still part of the Holy Roman Empire. It just had some minor autonomy, and was proclaimed in response to the First French Empire under Napoleon. And it was also led by Francis I, who was still Francis II of the Holy Roman Empire, as he was a Habsburg. However, in 1806, Francis II of the Holy Roman Empire dissolved it after their heavy loss in the Third Coalition War, specifically the Battle of Austerlitz. And afterwards, Francis I left the Holy Roman Empire to rule as the leader of the Austrian Empire. In 1815, Napoleon officially lost the last and the 7th Coalition War, where he was defeated by the UK, Prussia, Austria, and several other German states, and he was exiled to St. Helena, where he died 6 years later. During this time, the monarchy was restored in France under Louis XVI's brother. Now let's talk about the German Confederation, which was also mentioned in the video. So in 1815, after Napoleon had lost the 7th Coalition War, the German Confederation was created, which was basically a weak link of various German-speaking regions. But over the 18th and the 19th centuries, it became a lot weaker. So the video also talks about how Napoleon, after he destroyed the Holy Roman Empire, he created his own puppet state called the Confederation of the Rhine. And still the rivalry between Prussia and Austria continued. So again, the Congress of Vienna created the German Confederation. But due to its weak government and the 1848 European revolutions, as well as the Austro-Prussian rivalry, it collapsed in 1866. But we'll talk a little bit about what replaced it soon afterwards. Now let's talk about the Italian Wars of Independence, which might seem a little bit unrelated. However, they were essentially conflicts between France and Austria that just used Italy as a pawn. So the First Italian War of Independence began in 1848. And during this time, Italy was still divided into different kingdoms, as it had not yet unified into one. And the Austrian Habsburg Empire ruled over Lombardy and Venetia. And so basically what happened was that there was a movement that really wanted to get rid of the Austrian rule in these parts of Italy. And Piedmont Sardinia, which was allied with France, helped defeat Austria later on. So afterwards, the Second Italian War of Independence began in 1858 with the same parties as the previous war. Austria first declared war on Piedmont Sardinia, and then France came in to help them in support of the Piedmont. The Piedmontese and the French destroyed Austria, leading to the unification of Lombardy, Savoy, and Nice under Piedmont's control. So now Piedmont became the major power in the Italian peninsula. And after various battles, Italy was created in 1861, known as the Kingdom of Italy. Now in the Austro-Prussian Wars, Austria and Prussia fought a 7-week war in 1866. over which one would be the leading German force, because as we know, there was still a major rivalry. Prussia won, but allowed the Austrian Empire to remain almost intact, because they knew that they would be a lot stronger if there were two German states. So what exactly happened? Because of the strong Prussian-Italian alliance, which allowed Prussia to easily win, they made Austria sign the Treaty of Prague, where Prussia gained Hanover and Frankfurt, while Italy gained Venetia. The Prussians then took complete control of the German Confederation and then replaced it into the Northern German Confederation, which was completely under Prussian rule. After Austria's crushing loss to Prussia, the Austrian-Hungarian Compromise was signed into law. Thus, the former Kingdom of Austria and the Kingdom of Hungary became one dual monarchy, known as the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Now, before 1867, which was the key date, the Kingdom of Hungary had existed since 1526 and was also ruled by the Habsburgs, so it was technically part of Austria, but not really officially. In 1699, Ottoman Hungary merged with the pre-existing kingdom because the Ottomans had just lost the Great Turkish War. Changes in Europe's balance of power due to Prussia's overtaking of Austria led to the unification with Austria, because Austria and Hungary wanted to be stronger than the Northern German Confederation. So how did this government exactly work? We're using the word dual monarchy, but what does that really mean? So its system of government kind of resembled the UK, as Austria was the leading governmental figure. But both states were independent. The Emperor of Austria was also the King of Hungary, because Hungary was not officially an empire yet. Both states still had their own prime minister and legislative body, but most of the decisions were made by the Austrian Emperor and his key advisors, because they share a military, constitution, and currency. So they were one country at the same time as being two. Now let's watch this quick video explaining how the Austro-Hungarian Empire began its downfall. We will still discuss its crushing loss in World War I, but let's just talk about what weakened it before the World War.
At the end of the Napoleonic Wars, the Austrian Empire was the leading great power in Europe. Yet, a century later, when it was time for the First World War, Austria's position had declined massively. Which raises the question, why? Why did the Austrian Empire and later Austria-Hungary decline? So, as of Napoleon's defeat, Austrian leadership was instrumental in deciding what a post-war Europe would look like. And Austria's goal was simple: reset things to how they were before the French Revolution, because this was the world that Austria knew and the one that Austria could succeed in. Of course, this environment wouldn't last, and there were three primary reasons that a century later Austria's position amongst the great powers was greatly diminished. Reason one was nationalism, the idea that polity should be made up of the same people and the lands that they live in. For a multi-ethnic empire like Austria, this was a problem, since it could potentially lead to parts of the empire wanting to break away, and boy did it. After Serbia, Romania and Italy popped into existence, there were outside forces seeking unity with populations ruled by Vienna. And in the middle of this, in 1848, revolutions broke out all across the empire. The German, Hungarian, Italian, Romanian and Bohemian parts of the empire saw revolutions and ethnic violence break out over the course of 2 months. And the Hungarian Revolution required the help of the Russian army to suppress, and it led to the abdication of the emperor in favour of Franz Joseph. To the north, nationalism undermined Austria's relationship with the German-speaking world. Napoleon's abolition of the smaller anachronistic German states, as well as the ending of the Holy Roman Empire, were permanent, and this worked well for Prussia. Austria wanted to keep Saxony and its absolutist ruler independent from Prussia, and so, in return for Saxony not getting gobbled up, Prussia was given all of this, which meant that Prussia was now on its way to becoming an industrial power. However, Austria didn't industrialise at the same pace, and the empire's leadership had little desire to change anything. And why would they? Since, as of 1850, despite the turmoil they'd been through, the Habsburgs were still doing okay. In fact, they were now the mediators of ethnic conflict within the empire. The problem was that internal stability was now linked to foreign events, and Habsburg foreign policy was atrocious. For example, the Austrians alienated their Russian allies when they refused to help them out during the Crimean War, and when combined with military incompetence, this led to Austria losing land to Sardinia, which soon became Italy, as well as losing its influence in Germany after getting soundly beaten by Prussia in 1866. This defeat was so bad that the empire's leaders were forced to refashion the Austrian Empire into the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The plan was that by giving Hungary equal footing with Austria, the Hungarians would remain loyal, but fun fact, no. The splitting of the empire was a major long-term blow to its position as a great power. All across Europe, governments were centralising, which led to greater levels of economic planning, military coordination, and industrial output. And to make things even more difficult, Hungarian leadership was more than happy to veto and sabotage Viennese plans for reform. Attempts to reform agriculture? No. Trying to increase taxes to pay for military modernisation? No. Perhaps the most notable example, though, was when Austrian leadership wanted to join France's side during the Franco-Prussian War. The Hungarians threatened to make life difficult for them, which meant no war. Fearing that the empire was doomed unless it reformed, heir to the throne Franz Ferdinand and friends came up with two possible solutions. Solution 1 was the United States of Greater Austria. This would see the dual monarchy transform from this to this. Solution number 2 was turning the dual monarchy into the treble monarchy, in which a new kingdom for Slavs would be carved out of Austria and Hungary and made semi-independent. The problem was that there was no way that Hungary would ever accept these proposals, something Franz Ferdinand acknowledged, and also he was too busy being shot to see them ever proposed. At which point, World War I. And when this happened, Austria's slow beginnings industrialising, combined with Hungarian refusal to reform and modernise, as well as the internal pressures of nationalism and the stresses of World War I, would kill the empire for good. I hope you
Afterwards, there was the Franco-German War between France and Germany, where this was caused because of France wanting to restore their dominant position in Europe after the Northern German Confederation had been created. So because France lost this war, they had to pay Germany billions of marks, which made them incredibly upset. But then afterwards, the German states proclaimed their union as the German Empire, which was even worse for French. The French determination to reclaim their lost lands after the war was a key factor in them wanting to completely destroy Germany in the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. So at the end of the war, France was defeated and invaded by its enemies. Chancellor Otto von Bismarck proclaimed the German Empire in the Palace of Versailles' Hall of Mirrors. Following the humiliations meted out by Napoleon III, who was Napoleon I's nephew that previously weakened Germany, Germany finally had its revenge. Now let's talk a little bit about the connection between the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. So one interesting similarity is that the Ottoman Empire took over the Eastern Roman Empire and had several wars with the Habsburgs, who led the Holy Roman Empire, which replaced the Western Roman Empire. And we see this through the Ottoman Habsburg Wars that happened during the 16th and the 17th centuries, that ended with the Austrian Empire conquering the rest of Hungary and unifying it with the already existing Kingdom of Hungary, as well as Transylvania. Section 6. Pre-World War I and World War I. So as we've learned many times, the Balkan Wars were a precursor to World War I. So the Ottomans dominated the Balkans until their loss in the 1699 Great Turkish War, where then Russia became the dominant power. They started supporting Slavic independence movements to weaken the Ottomans, who were their enemy. Later on, Bosnia was nominally given to Austria, although it was still ruled by the Ottoman Empire. Serbia was incredibly upset because they felt a key cultural connection to Bosnia and they wanted the land. The Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires faced the competition from Russian-backed Slavic states, and their hatred of Russia is one of the key reasons why they were on the same side during World War I. Although Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1908, it had little effect on the Ottoman Empire, but it really frustrated Russia and the other greater powers because they wanted to keep what had already existed. Now, we also know that the Balkan Wars were between a collection of of newly independent Balkan nations against the Ottoman empires, and it really weakened the Ottoman Empire as Serbia, Albania, Greece, and Bulgaria really gained a lot more power. World War One. So as we also know, there were 6 main causes: European expansionism, Serbs wanting independence, Franz Ferdinand's assassination, interlocking alliances, Germany giving their full support to Austria, and the German population supporting participation. In 1918, the German Revolution happened and resulted in the replacement of the German constitutional monarchy with a republic that later became known as the Weimar Republic. On November 11, 1918, World War I had ended. Section 7. Post-World War I and pre-World War II. So as you know, there were 6 key treaties after World War I. We'll mostly talk about the ones with Germany, Austria, and Hungary. So the first one was the Treaty of Versailles with Germany, where they lost 13% of their European territory. If we look at this map, we can see how they lost territory to countries like Poland and France. But they also had to demilitarize the Rhinelands, and they lost all their African and Asian colonies. Germany and Austria were not allowed to unite, and Germany owed retribution payments worth over $500 billion today. Imagine. Historians believe that the harshness of the Treaty of Versailles led to Germany wanting another conflict, which they did. This is why the 2 world wars are often called one 30-year war. And the second treaty was with Austria, called the Treaty of Saint-Germain, where Austria lost land to the newly formed Czechoslovakia, which also took the large German-speaking population called Sudetenland. And they also gave land to Poland, and they gave land to the newly independent Yugoslavia. The third one was with Bulgaria, called the Treaty of Neuilly, where they lost 250,000 people. The fourth was with Hungary, and after the Treaty of Versailles, it was the second most detrimental, because Hungary lost 2/3 of their territory and their people. The fifth was with the Ottoman Empire, which was incredibly ambitious and was called the Treaty of Sèvres, which wanted to give so much territory to 2 different countries, including a new proposed Kurdistan. But it was not respected, and it resulted with the Treaty of Lausanne, which created Turkey's modern-day borders. Section 8. Pre-World War II and World War II. The lack of organized government and the failing socialist economic measures led to mass unrest and was one of the defining reasons behind Hitler's rise to power. He wanted to make Germany great again. In 1935, he created the Nuremberg Laws, which prohibited interracial marriage and stopped Jews from employing Germans. Thousands were convicted or put into concentration camps. Let's watch this video about Hitler's rise to power.
Society with many anti-Semitic people. How did Adolf Hitler, a tyrant who orchestrated one of the largest genocides in human history, rise to power in a democratic country? The story begins at the end of World War I. With a successful Allied advance in 1918, Germany realized the war was unwinnable and signed an armistice ending the fighting. As its imperial government collapsed, civil unrest and worker strikes spread across the nation. Fearing a communist revolution, major parties joined to suppress the uprisings, establishing the parliamentary Weimar Republic. One of the new government's first tasks was implementing the peace treaty imposed by the Allies. In addition to losing over 1/10 of its territory and dismantling its army, Germany had to accept full responsibility for the war and pay reparations, debilitating its already weakened economy. All this was seen as a humiliation by many nationalists and veterans. They wrongly believed the war could have been won if the army hadn't been betrayed by politicians and protesters. For Hitler, these views became obsession, and his bigotry and paranoid delusions led him to pin the blame on Jews. His words found resonance in a society with many anti-Semitic people. By this time, hundreds of thousands of Jews had integrated into German society, but many Germans continued to perceive them as outsiders. After World War I, Jewish success led to ungrounded accusations of subversion and war profiteering. It cannot be stressed enough that these conspiracy theories were born out of fear, anger, and bigotry, not fact. Nonetheless, Hitler found success with them. When he joined a small nationalist political party, his manipulative public speaking launched him into its leadership and drew increasingly larger crowds. Combining anti-Semitism with populist resentment, the Nazis denounced both communism and capitalism as international Jewish conspiracies to destroy Germany. The Nazi Party was not initially popular. After they made an unsuccessful attempt at overthrowing the government, the party was banned, and Hitler jailed for treason. But upon his release about a year later, he immediately began to rebuild the movement. And then, in 1929, the Great Depression happened. It led to American banks withdrawing their loans from Germany, and the already struggling German economy collapsed overnight. Hitler took advantage of the people's anger, offering them convenient scapegoats and a promise to restore Germany's former greatness. Mainstream parties proved unable to handle the crisis, while left-wing opposition was too fragmented by internal squabbles. And so, some of the frustrated public flocked to the Nazis, increasing their parliamentary votes from under 3% to over 18% in just 2 years. In 1932, Hitler ran for president, losing the election to decorated war hero General von Hindenburg. But with 36% of the vote, Hitler had demonstrated the extent of his support. The following year, advisors and business leaders convinced Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as chancellor, hoping to channel his popularity for their own goals. Though the chancellor was only the administrative head of parliament, Hitler steadily expanded the power of his position. While his supporters formed paramilitary groups and fought protesters in the streets, Hitler raised fears of a communist uprising and argued that only he could restore law and order. Then, in 1933, a young worker was convicted of setting fire to the Parliament building. Hitler used the event to convince the government to grant him emergency powers. Within a matter of months, freedom of the press was abolished, other parties were disbanded, and anti-Jewish laws were passed. Many of Hitler's early radical supporters were arrested and executed along with potential rivals. And when President Hindenburg died in August 1934, it was clear there would be no new election. Disturbingly, many of Hitler's early measures didn't require mass repression. His speeches exploited people's fear and ire to drive their support behind him and the Nazi Party. Meanwhile, businessmen and intellectuals wanting to be on the right side of public opinion endorsed Hitler. They assured themselves and each other that his more extreme rhetoric was only for show. Decades later, Hitler's rise remains a warning of how fragile democratic institutions can be in the face of angry crowds and a leader willing to feed their anger and exploit their fears.
In 1938, Nazi Germany had annexed Austria in the Auschwitz. However, Austria gave their full support behind it, but this still broke the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. Now, we also heard of the Sudetenland, which was a province in northern Czechoslovakia. Hitler believed that it belonged to Germany because it was incredibly German-speaking. So he demanded that Prime Minister of Britain, Neville Chamberlain, have Czechoslovakia ceded to him, which he did in 1938. Now, Neville tried to be very calm and diplomatic, and he just saw it as a diplomatic solution. but Czechoslovakia saw it as the UK completely betraying them, as they had a pact with them and France. Afterwards, Germany invaded the rest of Czechoslovakia, setting off tensions in Central Europe. World War II. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, starting the war. And Germany had a non-aggression pact with the Soviets that was broken in 1941, which forced the Soviets to join the Allies, one of the key reasons why Germany lost. On May 7th, 1945, my birthday, Germany surrendered. And on September 2nd, 1945, Japan surrendered, officially ending World War II. And the Holocaust was a key issue during World War II. The Holocaust was one of the largest genocides ever, with over 11 million victims, including 6 million Jews. We must remember that it's still a very sensitive issue, although it's an important event to discuss. However, we must learn from such disgraceful events to guarantee that they do not happen again. There were 3 key concentration camps that millions of Jews were sent to: Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, and Dachau. Section 9, Post-World War II. The Nuremberg trials aimed at bringing 24 Nazi war criminals to justice. But Hitler was never able to be put on trial because he committed suicide before the war had ended. So he put Joseph Goebbels in charge of the country. Let's watch this video to learn about what happened after World War II to Germany, as it also mentions communism in East Germany.
On the 1st of September 1939, Hitler gave the order for the invasion of Poland. In the preceding 6 years, Germany expanded its empire into numerous other countries. But fast forward to the 8th of May 1945, and with Hitler dead, General Alfred Jodl signs the order for unconditional surrender to the Allies. But what next? In this video, we take a look at what happened to Germany after World War II. During the course of the war, Allied bombers had decimated German cities all over the country. Once the push into the country took place in 1945, ground troops began fighting against the German forces holed up in these cities. With Hitler's strict policy of no surrender and fighting to the last man, many bomb-ravaged towns and cities were further flattened by these last-ditch efforts. As the Soviets moved into Berlin and the fighting became more desperate, the capital became a vast wasteland of rubble, burnt-out vehicles and dead people. It was a horrible place to be for not only the soldiers, but for the civilians stuck there with nowhere to go. Many millions of German civilians were now homeless, with a large portion of the male population annihilated. This left many of the women and children in poverty, as there was no source of income. Hundreds of thousands of German soldiers were held in POW camps all over Europe and the Soviet Union. A very detailed investigation took place where thousands of civilians and soldiers alike were interviewed in order to weed out those responsible for war crimes and the Holocaust. It took years for some of these soldiers to eventually be returned to their homes. In a lot of cases, in the Soviet Union, soldiers weren't returned back to Germany for more than 10 years. Most of the main perpetrators of these crimes were eventually captured, and between 1945 and 1946, the Nuremberg trials took place. These offenders, which included some of the highest-ranking officials in the Nazi Party, such as Hermann Göring and Albert Speer, were prosecuted for their offences. Most received either life imprisonment or were executed. In a meeting known as the Yalta Conference, which had happened in early 1945, the leaders of Britain, the US and the Soviet Union had come together to determine Germany's fate post-war. It was decided that Germany would give back all its newly occupied territories to the respective countries. The German pre-war borders would then be divided into 4 main sectors: France, responsible for the southwest, Britain for the northwest, Soviet Union to the northeast, and United States to the southeast. Berlin was also important, but it was now in the Soviet sector, so it too was divided into 4 individual sections. Each country was therefore accountable for what took place in each of its sectors. Berlin in particular became a focal point, with each of the superpowers coming to a head there over many issues. Germany was forced to pay reparations to Britain, France and the Soviet Union. This was largely in the form of dismantled factories, coal and forced labour. But Britain and the United States also obtained intellectual reparations, such as scientific technology and patents created during the Nazi rule. The Allies agreed that it was mostly up to the German people themselves to rebuild their country. They were responsible for dismantling factories, as it was the aim to return Germany back to its industrial status prior to the war. With tensions between the Soviet Union and Western Allies growing, the Cold War began, and the Soviets started to block off its German-held territories from the Western Allies. By 1961, 1,000 East Germans, including many skilled labourers, professionals and intellectuals, were leaving every day. The Berlin Wall would be constructed to shield these unfortunate people stuck in East Berlin from escaping. Germany wouldn't be militarised until many years later. East Germany looked for men who could act in its newly formed army, the National People's Army. Further to that, border troops were required to stop civilians fleeing west. The government recruited thousands of ex-Wehrmacht and Waffen-SS soldiers who were in Soviet Gulag prisons. A similar thing happened in West Germany, where ex-Wehrmacht soldiers were recruited into the Bundeswehr army. Luckily, there was plenty of weapons and equipment left over from the war to provide these armies. Ultimately, it took many years for Germany to rebuild. This was hindered by the Cold War and the Soviet influence over its eastern sectors. But by 1989, the Soviet influence fell away and the Berlin Wall torn down. A more modern and progressive Germany rose up to the one we know today. As always, guys, thanks for watching.
In 1954, the London Agreement on German debt was signed into law, and it involved the US, the UK, and Germany, and it related to the harshness of the Treaty of Versailles. Remember those $500 billion US that Germany had to pay? Those were now made a lot less. Fall of communism. So as we learned, the Berlin Wall fell in November of 1989. On December 26, 1991, the USSR collapsed, officially ending communism in Europe. Rob Armstrong asks, please tell us about the countries in the terms of their size of economies, populations, and geography. Well, Germany has the largest size, population, and GDP, but Austria has the largest GDP per capita. Germany's capital is Berlin, Austria's is Vienna, and Hungary's is Budapest. Section 10, Prominent People. So first we have Albert Einstein, who was one of the greatest physicists of all time, and who created E equals mc squared, which has been dubbed the world's most famous equation. Now we have Ludwig van Beethoven, who was an incredibly famous composer who created Four Elise and Ode to Joy, two of the world's most famous songs. Now we have Mozart, who was a child prodigy. We have Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's an Austrian-American actor, bodybuilder, and the former governor of California. Nikola Tesla, who invented the AC electrical supply. Marie Antoinette, who was the last queen of France before the French Revolution. She was an Austrian princess and French King Louis XVI's wife. She was known as Madame Deficit because of her lavish spending during France's financial troubles. When almost 50% of the country was poor, she was riding an elephant in Africa. Now we have Adolf Hitler, who I'm not going to say anything about except for the fact that he is synonymous with evil. We have Harry Houdini, who is one of the most famous illusionists of all time. And Joseph Pulitzer, who was known for winning the Pulitzer Prizes in 1917. How do you say butterfly in these languages? In German, it is Schmetterling, and in Hungarian, it is Pilango. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for attending.